What is going on, Trash Talkers? We're back with another episode for you. Today, we continue our series ranking teams in the NFL, this time defensive lines. So we're going to rank each team A through F based on their defensive line. This includes edge rushers. All that and much more coming your way right now! All right, Nick. Well, we are ready to go. We have done the entire offense. Now we switch to the next side of the ball, which is defense. And we have to start with the guys in the trenches. We talked about offensive line yesterday. Now the guys that they have to face each and every week, you got to go with the defensive linemen.
Yeah, these are some of the most important people in the NFL. When you talk about people other than a quarterback who are important, you have to go straight for an edge rusher. If you're not a quarterback, you need to be a guy who's getting to the quarterback. That's how you make the money. That's how you win games in the NFL. That's what it all revolves around. And so these are some of the most pivotal positions. And if you're not at the top, you need to be working your way to the top. And if you're not, chances are you're not going to be winning anytime soon.
Starting off with the F tier, we have teams like the Atlanta Falcons, the Minnesota Vikings, the Houston Texans, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Green Bay Packers. Now, I want to take a couple of these teams and put them into one category. The Atlanta Falcons and the Green Bay Packers, they are predominantly set with one guy up the middle and a couple of edge rushers. You have Dante Fowler in Atlanta, and you have Preston Smith in Green Bay. Outside of those guys, not a whole hell of a lot to talk about on the defensive line. That's how they end up being in the F tier. Then you take a look at teams like the Houston Texans and the Minnesota Vikings. These guys have been decimated over the last couple of free agencies, losing players left and right to different teams, and all of a sudden they're left with just a shell of what they once had. The Houston Texans are on here because they have given up 200 plus rushing yards to Derrick Henry 4 straight games. 4 straight games, and it's because he doesn't even get touched until he's into the second level of the defense. The defensive line is nowhere to be found. Teams know that they can run on the Houston Texans. That's how they end up here. The Minnesota Vikings, they lost Linval Joseph. They lost a couple other players. That's how why they're in the F tier. They have to rebuild this entire front seven, and it starts with the defensive line. And the Seattle Seahawks, you lost a big piece in Jarran Reed. He went to the Kansas City Chiefs, and now you have a major hole you're going to have to fill, especially in the NFC West. I look for the Seattle Seahawks to really be in a predicament here now that Carlos Dunlap is the only one I see as a viable option on the defensive line.
Yeah, there's a growing theme with a lot of these F-tier teams, and that's they can't keep the guys that made them successful in the first place. Guys like J.J. Watt and Everson Griffin and Vic Beasley. And these guys were pivotal in the success of these teams in previous years. Now that they're not on the team, you don't see these teams succeeding. If you want to stay successful, you got to keep the pillars that make your team great in the first place. All right, moving on to the D tier, we have the Tennessee Titans, the New England Patriots, the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, the Detroit Lions, and the New Orleans Saints. And when you look at the Tennessee Titans, they have some young guys, but they were awful last year when it came to pass rush. They were one of the worst teams in pass rush success and got the fewest pressures on quarterbacks. You can't be one of the best in the league if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback. You might be good in the run, but that's only one phase of football. You've got to be stellar all around on the defensive line if you're going to be better than this. I expect more from Mike Vrabel's guys. For the New England Patriots, last season they had nothing going for them. They didn't have a run protection. They didn't have pass rush. They had nothing. They couldn't do anything right. They had safeties playing linebacker just to help in run support. They were absolutely abysmal. That's why they spent so heavy on their front seven in the offseason this season. We'll see if they can turn around, but right now they're in the D tier. For the New York Giants, they have Leonard Williams up the middle, but you don't have any edge rushers. How can you get pressure on the quarterback with only a defensive tackle? You just can't. That doesn't exist. It's never going to happen unless your name's Aaron Donald. So they've got to work on that on their defensive ends if they're going to improve this pass rush. For the Dallas Cowboys, they have some guys like DeMarcus Lawrence and Aldon Smith, but in the middle of the field, they were counting on guys like Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy to work out. Well, we know McCoy got hurt and was cut from the team right after, and Dontari Poe just didn't work out and ended up being cut from the team as well. They just need to work on their run support up front. That's going to help create isolation scenarios for these defensive ends in which they'll have easier times getting to the quarterback. But without a defensive tackle, you're going to be struggling to get anywhere. For the Detroit Lions, they're really starting from scratch. They don't have anywhere to go. They released Trey Flowers before last season. You drafted Romeo Okwara, Julian Okwara's brother, and put them together, but they're more stand-up outside linebackers. When you put them on the end, they're being bullied around by these tackles. They're not big enough to play defensive end. And then that's why you saw them go out this offseason and go get Michael Brockers from the Rams to help bolster the middle of this defensive line to help in the run game, hopefully create those isolation scenarios that I said earlier. You need those for smaller defensive ends if they're going to work out. And for the New Orleans Saints, they had some great pieces last year. They would be A tier if they were able to keep any of them. Right now, it's just Cameron Jordan right now, and they're not going to be able to pass rush. They're not going to be able to stop the run. It's all going to go downhill for this defensive line come next season without retaining 3 of the 4 main pieces.
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at the D tier quickly, I look at this, and you mentioned basically one name per defense. With the Tennessee Titans, it's Daquan Jones. With the New York Giants, it's Leonard Williams. With the Dallas Cowboys, it's DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, these guys, these teams, the New Orleans Saints have Cameron Jordan. These teams have one guy on the defensive line, and then they're just trying to fill in pieces everywhere else. The New England Patriots and the Detroit Lions are, they're different stories. The Detroit Lions, they're basically in shambles. They have to figure out exactly what's going on with this team. They are the running theme in all of our tiers. They are consistently at the bottom because this entire team needs to be revamped, refocused, and ready to go in maybe 5 or 6 years. That they are not where they should be right now, and they have to basically blow it up and start over. The New England Patriots retooled through free agency, plus the draft over the last couple of years. We haven't seen it spark anything yet, but I'd like to see where the New England Patriots can go with all of their new offseason acquisitions this year. Next up, we have the C tier. That includes teams like the Miami Dolphins, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Denver Broncos, the Indianapolis Colts, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the New York Jets. Starting off with the obvious, we have the Miami Dolphins, who, their defensive line has always been pretty productive. That they are a solid average line. They did lose Shaq Lawson, but we'll see how they address that through the draft. Right now, they're just your run-of-the-mill average defensive line. Then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have continued to beef up things, but we haven't seen how they're all going to work out. How is everybody that Jacksonville has brought in going to work out? Before we judge them, they have to sit right in the middle, and then once we see them, we'll get a better understanding at the end of the year. The Denver Broncos have decided to bring in a lot of these guys, and don't forget you have Bradley Chubb and Von Miller on the edges. You have some defensive tackles as well. They brought in Shamar Stephen from the Minnesota Vikings, so I like what they've been able to do on this defensive line. Let's see if it works out for them, but right now they have a lot more to focus on than just the defensive line. The Indianapolis Colts, they did a really good job getting DeForest Buckner last year, and he seemed to do really well. But they lost some pieces around him, and we got to wonder, how's this defensive line going to hold up, especially when you got King Henry in your division. You got to face him twice a year. Buckner's not going to be able to do it himself, and you might end up like the Houston Texans if you don't get this thing fixed early and often. Then you have the Los Angeles Chargers losing Melvin Ingram, as unproductive as he was last year. This is a guy that really helped set the edge and took pressure off of Joey Bosa. Linval Joseph is a good person up the middle, but they're missing a key piece, and not having Melvin Ingram there is going to be a major issue for them. Then you have the Cincinnati Bengals. They added Trey Hendrickson, but you lost Carl Lawson, so there's a lot of give and take here. I think it's just you lost one, but you replaced them with somebody who's of similar value. I don't really see that they got much better. I think they're just still an average defensive line. And then in the New York Jets, they have Quinnen Williams, who's an incredible talent. They added some pieces like Sheldon Rankins and Carl Lawson, who I just talked about. I like where they're headed, but so many new pieces on the defensive line means I have to see where they're going to be going. They're another team that where I expect to reshuffle them by the end of the year.
Yeah, the Miami Dolphins are an interesting team as far as their defensive line goes because you trade Shaq Lawson for Benardrick McKinney, so you're getting rid of a defensive end for a linebacker who is mainly for pass coverage, and then you lose Davin Godchaux in free agency and replace him with Adam Butler, who is a finesse style defensive tackle, not a big brawler like Davin Godchaux, and not going to help out in the run game like him. So you lose key pieces like that on your defensive line. There's no way that the Dolphins' defensive line is going to be as effective and as explosive as it was last season. It's just not going to happen. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, you've got studs like Josh Allen and Taven Bryan on the line, but you still got to add more pieces. They can't do it by themselves. Josh Allen had a great rookie year, but then fell off a little bit last year. Taven Bryan, he took over the defensive tackle role all by himself last year for the first time. It's still growing pains with these guys, and like you said, they're young. We're going to have to see how they progress throughout their career, and it's just a time will tell situation with them. For the New York Jets, they're looking solid right now. They added Sheldon Rankins to Quinnen Williams in the middle, and they add Carl Lawson on the outside. And I think with Robert Saleh there, seeing what he did with Nick Bosa, I think that this could really elevate the New York Jets defensive line and make them one of the scarier defensive lines in the NFL. But until we see them actually prove it to us, they're going to have to stay here. Now in the B tier, taken up a notch, we have the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Arizona Cardinals, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Washington Football Team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Carolina Panthers, and the Las Vegas Raiders. With the Baltimore Ravens, they had some nice pieces in Yannick Ngakoue and Matt Judon last season, but now they're gone. You're really struggling to have edge rush. You have a solid run defense with Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell, but they're not going to rush the edge. That's just not what they do. So you've got to figure out how you're going to get to the quarterback next season. The Kansas City Chiefs are looking really solid, but we'll see. They're looking really solid, especially after the addition of Jarran Reed, a very sneaky signing by them. Put him alongside Chris Jones and Frank Clark. They're going to be very scary and could really elevate this Kansas City defense. For the Arizona Cardinals, J.J. Watt is all I have to say. He is a manimal. Put him opposite Chandler Jones, and it's going to be terrorizing for everybody in the NFC West. I think that this team has the potential to be one of the best defensive lines we've ever seen. For the Philadelphia Eagles, you have Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, but these guys are getting older, and Brandon Graham doesn't seem to be holding up like he used to. Fletcher Cox is really the only one anchoring down this defensive line and getting pressure on the quarterback. He can't do it all by himself, and they're going to have to figure out how they're going to fill the rest of the positions. For the Washington Football Team, they're absolutely stellar. They just need to grow a little bit. Chase Young in his first year was great for a rookie. I want to see him improve with the weapons around him. There's too much talent on this defensive front seven for them to just be a B tier. They need to be in a whole other tier by themselves with that amount of talent. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're just an aging group. They used to be A tier, but now they're dropping with age. You have Cameron Hayward on one side and Stephon Tuitt on the other, but these guys, now that they're over the age of 30, they're regressing. They're not as big as they used to be, as dominant on the ends as they used to be, and now you're relying more on TJ Watt to get the job done and get to the quarterback. Now without Bud Dupree, the age of Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Hayward are really going to show, because they're not going to be able to get to the quarterback like Bud Dupree was, and they're not going to be able to take on the extra tasks that he leaves behind. For the Carolina Panthers, they have some young studs that are really thriving for them. Derek Brown, who was their top 10 pick last year, and Brian Burns, who's really a stud outside linebacker, defensive end. These two are really anchoring down this defensive line and making them really, really solid, making this defense really great. So just like the Washington Football Team, I really expect this team to progress and grow and be better over time. They're just young and learning in their young career. And finally, for the Las Vegas Raiders, adding Yannick Ngakoue to a team that already had Carl Nassib, Max Crosby, and Cleveland Farrell is bonkers. These guys are going to terrorize the edge. When you have Yannick Ngakoue standing up as an edge rusher, that's when he was most dominant with Jacksonville. And that's why he wasn't having success in Minnesota and in Baltimore, is because they had him as in a three technique instead of having him stand up. Now that he's back in his traditional role, he's going to thrive as an outside linebacker rushing the edge. With Max Crosby fully healthy and Cleveland Farrell still growing as a defensive end, I fully expect these guys to grow. There's so much young talent all around in this B tier, as you've seen. They're going to be growing, and this is going to be the next era of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just taking a look at some of these teams, and a lot of it is the old guard. You have the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers. These guys, even the Baltimore Ravens, these are the old guard teams. You have some of the names that we have known and loved for many years now, and they're starting to phase out. So teams that were up at the top are now starting to falter, and we see it because either players are leaving, but also these guys are getting much older. And then you take a look at teams like the Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raider. These teams, they continue to add talent. They continue to say, even though there's only two quote unquote edge positions at a time, it doesn't matter. We're going to continue to invest in that position and rush the passer at an insane pace. And I like what these teams are doing. And then you hit you hit the nail right on the head when it came to the Washington football team and the Carolina Panthers. These teams are extremely young and extremely talented. You talked about the Panthers. Don't forget about Yetur Gross-Matos. Brian Burns is exceptional, but they have such incredible talent from the first couple of rounds over the last couple of years that this team is just oozing with talent and capabilities, but they have to just be unlocked. They have to be coached up, and they have to have playing time in the NFL together. I look for the Carolina Panthers to be one of those teams that really rockets out of the B tier, maybe ends up at the top of the A tier come next year. And finally, we have the A tier. And starting off, we have the San Francisco 49ers, the Cleveland Browns, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Chicago Bears. Starting off with the San Francisco 49ers, we know exactly what we've got with this defensive front. It is ballers all the way around. Nick Bosa, I know you hate him, Nick, but it's okay. He does make our A tier list because he is that dominant. A lot of these guys on this defense are that dominant, and rightfully so. What they have been able to do under Robert Salah has been nothing short of spectacular, and I continue for them to utilize that or to continue that even without him there. The Cleveland Browns, I mean, their defensive front has been stellar over the last couple of years. They lost a couple of pieces, but they replaced them right back, and they're not going to miss a beat. Myles Garrett is a star-studded pass rusher. He's right up there, a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL. And then they have a solid defensive line that can stop the run. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, nothing much needs to be said, but Super Bowl champs, right? I mean, these guys, they have their entire defensive line back from last year. They can rush the passer. They can stop the run. You got everything. There's no need to really go into it. The Buffalo Bills, they spent a lot of money last year trying to get this defensive front seven situated, and they hit the nail right on the head. They even spent some draft picks trying to get it done. And guess what? All of these guys, they were able to stay in a rotation. They stayed healthy. They stayed active. And even throughout the, late in the fourth quarter of every single game, these guys had fresh tanks because they weren't being overutilized like some teams who continue to use the same players every single play over and over again. The Los Angeles Rams, on the other hand, they are anchored by arguably the best defensive lineman in NFL history. That is Aaron Donald. This guy is absolutely phenomenal. There isn't a single bad thing you can say about Aaron Donald or the game that he plays. And I mean, they are A tier only because he's on this team. And then you add the pieces around him, and it's just you're literally just adding more fuel to the fire because Aaron Donald is an A tier defensive line in and of himself. And then the Chicago Bears, we know what they look like. Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, these guys are ready to get at it. Stop the run, stop the pass. It doesn't matter. They can do it all. I love what all of these teams bring to the table, and these defensive lines to me are the best in the NFL.
Yeah, these teams are in the A tier because they are efficient at both stopping the run and getting to the quarterback. And there's no better example than the 49ers. When this team is healthy, they are the worst for an offensive line. They are an offensive line's nightmare, and they were the best at getting to the quarterback in 2019. In 2020, they suffered massive injuries, and in 2021, we're going to fully expect them to return back to their 2019 form. They have proven it to us before, and they've retained pretty much everybody except for trading DeForest Buckner last offseason, but they replaced him with a guy, Javon Kinlaw, who's his size and plays just as mean as he does. For the Cleveland Browns, they have an exceptional run stopping ability for their pass rush. Now they get even stronger. Even though they lost Larry Ogunjobi, they added Malik Jackson, who's a veteran and was a stalwart for the Jacksonville Jaguars when they went to the AFC Championship game. He was stellar for them. He got overlooked in Philly, and now he's going to make his revenge in Cleveland. The Buffalo Bills are the one team that I'm going to look out for to see if they can actually stay at the top here. I think that they could fall down a couple notches if they don't up their pass rush. They keep adding more people to their pass rush, but they cannot seem to get to the quarterback early, as often as they should be for the amount of talent that they have. Now that Star Lotulelei is coming back, it should really be a tell sign of whether this defensive line was a one-year wonder or if they're the real deal.
All right, well, that's going to do it for now. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. We go live every single day. That'll be all. Peace and love.